Hi, welcome to the Entrepreneurial Edge. I'm Chris Bishop and we're out on the road again. This time we're at the Grillhouse in Rosebank in Johannesburg. Now everybody surely has this dream of opening up their own restaurant. Now the people inside the industry say don't do it. So let's go and find out how far true this is. Established way back in 1995, the Grillhouse is regarded as one of South Africa's premium steakhouses. As one of the three founding members, Saul Mervis knows all too well what it takes to build up a successful culinary business. Now, a lot of people in this world, they say, I want to go and start a restaurant, like it's some sort of romantic quest. What do you say to those people?
Don't. I think that if I had 50 cents for every person who had come to me and said, my wife's a great cook, I think I'm going to start a restaurant, I would have retired just on that alone. As I mentioned previously, there is so much more to the restaurant industry. It's actually not about the food. The food is a byproduct of the restaurant industry. If somebody's hungry, they go to the local cafe on the corner, buy themselves a sandwich, they'll boil a sausage, make a hot dog. The restaurant is so experiential. It's about deciding where you're going to go. It's about making that choice of what you're going to eat. It's about the whole anticipation. From when you make a decision where you're going to go, picking up the telephone, making the reservation, you already know what type of an experience you're going to have, and it's about feeding people's ego, and it's about making them feel good about themselves. It's an overall entertainment. So a lot of people misread that completely, and they see the restaurant only at the times where we are serving customers. They see the easy part, so to speak, the part where we are on stage, where we are actually serving customers, making meals and cooking. But the behind the scenes, most of them have very little idea of what goes on.
And how difficult is it behind the scenes, as you're saying?
Well, it varies, I suppose, depending on what type of operation you run and how hands-on you are in your operation. We have built quite a big business, and the bigger the business, obviously, the more difficult it is, based on your number of staff that you have to employ. And staff can always be the toughest part of any industry. Right through to the number of customers that you seat and the number of times you turn a table. If you're running a small 60-seater restaurant that does one seating an evening, you've got 4 waiters and 8 people in the kitchen. You can't compare it to a restaurant that has 450 seats, turns the tables twice, has a team of 42 waiters, 8 barmen, 16 people just in the front kitchen, and on and on. That's why one of the funny things is that when people have what they call restaurant competitions, I always find it very hard to buy into a restaurant competition. You can't compare one restaurant with another if they are completely different businesses, as I've pointed out. It's not comparing apples with apples. And to me, never mind the food critic. If you want to find out what the best restaurant is, ask the bank manager. Because the one who banks the most money and makes the most profit at the end of the day, that's the best restaurant. I think a lot of the time people forget that a restaurant is a business. And as much as it is about entertainment, it is about making money in the end.
Well, just tell us how, as an entrepreneur, you started out here with this restaurant.
I was involved in the old Late Night Owls chain of restaurants many years ago, which was a family steakhouse. And then we came up with the idea where we wanted to take meat eating to a slightly different level. Definitely not nouvelle cuisine, but certainly to a better dining experience than the family steakhouse. Traveled quite extensively in the States. We saw a couple of concepts that we liked, and we brought the concept back and we turned it into what was the first, or what is the first grill house, so to speak, in South Africa. Since we opened the grill house 15 years ago, I think there must be a good 20 or 25 outlets that have tried to emulate the type of environment that we have, which is fantastic. We see that as being, it's almost flattering to us. But the big difference is that we are focused. We're focused in what we do. We are, as South Africans are, meat and potato people. South Africans love meat and potatoes, and I think one of the secrets of our success as to why we've had the longevity that we've had is that our menu has changed almost not over the last 15 years. Besides introducing a couple of new specials along the way, we do what we do, and we do it well. We won't possibly present the food in the best looking style, but certainly our emphasis is on consistency, where you know exactly, as a regular customer, most of our regular customers don't even look at the menu. They know exactly what they're going to order. They're coming to us for a certain thing. And I think if you can achieve that in the restaurant industry, if you can achieve that level of consistency, then I think that you're halfway there to making a success out of your business.
What are the difficulties that you face?
There are a number of difficulties. I think as a business grows, your biggest difficulties are funnily enough, with your staff, particularly in the industry where you are dealing with, and I use it in the loosest way, you're dealing with untrained staff, staff that you have to train yourself into the industry. So it's almost an entry-level staff. A lot of the time, the staff are promoted within the business by chronological time, having been trained within the business. So that's always tricky. The other big difficulties are dealing with customers. You're dealing with live people on an ongoing basis who are experiencing your product there and then immediately and have the right, or feel that they have even more of the right than they actually do, to completely criticize. You, in an industry, and I always maintain the restaurant industry is the single industry in the world where there are more experts not working in the industry than there are working in the industry, because everybody has an opinion, and their opinion counts for a lot. Everybody's got a better way of doing things than you have. So the difficulty, one of the difficulties as well, with the customers. And then you have your ongoing back-of-house concerns, which are continually to do with product quality, consistency of product, and to do with maintenance issues. One of the big issues as well is theft. You know, in the industry, you're dealing with three of the most desirable things in the world. One is people's ego, the other is alcohol, and the other is cash to a large degree. So balancing the three is a great trick on its own.
Now, also, restaurants in South Africa are having to deal with this smoking legislation. How does that affect your business plan?
The smoking legislation is a very tricky one, and it's become tougher and tougher over the years. I buy into it. I believe that it's correct what they're doing. I believe that people should have the right to eat in a smoke-free environment. But I think that in certain areas it might be a little too stringent, in that restaurateurs should maybe have the choice as to whether to make their establishment a smoking or a non-smoking establishment, at the peril of their business. If they make it smoking and nobody comes because it's smoking, they will learn a lesson accordingly. Having said that, there are a couple of rules that you can fit into. There are 4 major rules that you can fit into, which we have fortunately been able to accommodate within. So in 3 out of my 4 restaurants, we're lucky enough to physically have the space and the wherewithal to create dedicated smoking areas. It's tough to get around, but even the smokers, I think, are a little appreciative of being able to sit in more of a fresh air environment and eat their meal, and often pop into the smoking section for a quick cigarette.
The general running of your restaurant, how do you target your market? And also, what is it like when you start out trying to get enough cash to actually keep going? Starting
a restaurant is very difficult. They always say the 2 best days in any restaurateur's life are the day he starts his first restaurant and then the day he sells that restaurant. It's a tough industry, and a lot of the time you borrow money to be able to set it up. Restaurateurs are high risk for banks, so to be able to get money out of the banks is not that easy. And the return on investment is not what everybody thinks it is. The food costs are not what people think they are. If the amount of time somebody's walked into my restaurant and said, "Wow, you guys are printing money," I would love to be able to show them what goes on. There's an exercise we have where we take a 200 Rand note and we tear a half of it off. We say, that's for the rent. We tear a third, 40% of that off, and we say, that's for the food cost. We tear another 15%. We say, that's for the salary. Another 8% is for repairs. And by the time we've actually broken it down, there's this tiny little piece of a 200 Rand note, and you say to the customer, that's the corner we're printing. You deal with all the other aggravation. So it's tough from that point of view. And the other thing is, people don't see the expenses that go on behind the scenes. So they'll walk in the restaurant, and you must understand, customers are all partners in your business. Everybody thinks they own your restaurant. And they'll walk in and they'll have a look around, and they'll call you over and they'll say, tell me something. How many people do you seat in this restaurant? And now you know what's coming. And you say, well, we seat about 350 people. And they'll look at the menu and they'll say, average price per head, 200, 220. How many times do you turn the restaurant? And you say, well, 1.5, 2 times. And already, ching, 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 they're calculating it, and they've got it in their back pocket. You must be making 500 grand a month. So they don't get to see half of what goes on in the background. It's tough. The first 2 to 3 years, you're going to be battling just to repay your initial debt. But when you do strike it right, when you do get the balance right, it's not all doom and gloom. There's a fantastically satisfying feeling about running a successful restaurant. But you also have to look at it from a business point of view. You can't go in there blind thinking for every steak you sell, you're making X amount of profit, because it doesn't work like that.
Were there any times when you thought about just packing it in and walking away?
Some days I go a full 3 minutes without thinking that. I think we think that all the time. I think it's like any industry in the world, the grass always seems to be greener on the other side. So yes, it's fantastic. Yes, it's fun. People see us as being these great entertainers, walking around chatting to the customers. But there are many, many times where you think, I can't deal with one more problem like this. If I have to have one more issue like that, if I have to see that one person again, if I have to have one more staff problem. And it's taxing. But that's like in any industry in the world. I think that you get ground down by your day-to-day issues a lot of the time.
I mean, what are the biggest demons for the restaurant industry right now in 2010?
I think moving forward, I think the months of August and September are going to be a little bit difficult because of what we've experienced with World Cup. There was a euphoria here which we've never seen before. I think South Africans felt almost invincible. It was the pinnacle of any restaurateur's career the last couple of weeks. Having said that, I do believe people have overspent to a degree. People bought tickets they might not have afforded, plane tickets, paraphernalia. Leading up to the Christmas period, I think August and September are going to be a little bit tight, and we're going to need to rein back a little bit in those 2 months. But then I think, again, we'll be saved by the whole Christmas rush going forward. We were plagued to a degree by high prices, high incoming food prices, which was all over the news. People knew about that. They still don't like to see that translated to prices on their menu. But on the whole, I think the future is good for good restaurants. I think that if you're a focused business and you do what you do and you do it well and you don't try chasing the buck and being everything to everybody, there's a good future in the restaurant industry still in South Africa.
Now, speaking about the World Cup, I mean, Spain had a fairly good World Cup. Did you have a good World Cup in this restaurant?
We had a fantastic World Cup. We loved every minute of it. We worked very hard. We planned very well. I'd like to say we planned well in advance, and we were fortunate. Again, the restaurants that were in the hotspots, in the Rosebanks, Santons, Melrose Arches, they did very well. Restaurants in the smaller neighborhood areas, I think, battled a little bit. And also, I think, fortunately, restaurants that were the bigger restaurants that had the wherewithal financially to gear up for the World Cup in terms of maybe buying more TVs, stocking up a little bit, preparing themselves, they went through the whole World Cup unscathed. I think some people battled a bit with stock. But more than the money, and yes, I would be surprised if most restaurants didn't break all kinds of records. There were just throngs of people that wanted to have fun. More than the money, we had a lot of fun. We met fantastic people. We made a lot of friends. We had some big international companies that were based around us in the hotels that we have built great relationships going forward with. We met a lot of soccer football stars. We had the Paris Hiltons and Leonardo DiCaprios of the world coming for dinner, which is always a big feather in your cap, and everyone sitting around loves to see them, and it's great. It's a great status thing, so to speak. But again, I stress that the money part was not our aim, because I think a lot of people lost sight of the fact that World Cup was a 5-week period, 6 weeks maybe with all the preparation, and then done. And I think some restaurants made the grave mistake of maybe outpricing themselves for their local regular customers. Our drive was to make sure that we would still look after our local customers. Even if we were full, there's always place for your local regular customer, because when that final whistle blows and everyone's back on the plane to Spain, our customers that have been supporting us for 15 years are still going to be supporting us.
Now, this is a well-established restaurant. How difficult is it to start a restaurant from scratch? We're going to go across the city to find out. Do stay tuned.